Hi, everyone. So I'm here today with Kevin Day, who is not only an incredibly accomplished composer, but also a conductor and a jazz pianist. He has composed over 250 pieces of music, and that music has been performed all over the world at this point. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
Yes, I'm really excited to be here and to be part of this amazing project.
Yeah, absolutely. I think first I just want to say how so impressed I am with all of the different music you have written, frankly, like the diversity and ideas and themes and what you're really able to bring to life in your music is incredible. And I genuinely love listening to so many of your pieces.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
So maybe to give our audience a little bit of a background, when and how did you even first come in to start composing music?
Sure thing. I mean, my inspiration for music actually came from my parents. Both of them are musical people, and so from a young age, I was, completely like blown away by the idea of creating music and making music. And my father worked as a hip hop producer, but then later turned gospel producer, and so he made a lot of music. And my mother was a gospel singer, and so they were always playing music around our house, and would like take me to their rehearsals, or when my dad would have like recording sessions at home, I would be right up there with him, just being part of that process. So having two musical parents, I mean, that's what really drew me into what music was and got me interested in making it and playing it. And so how I got into composition was really through learning how to write music with my dad. He basically gave me composition lessons when I was a kid, and taught me about how do you make rhythm, how do you make a bass line, how do you make a melody, how do you make a counter melody, and all these concepts, how do you make harmony. And so I was basically getting beginning composition lessons from my dad when I was a kid. And then later, once I joined the band and joined orchestra and got into music in that way, that's what kind of drew me into notation and into like how do you write more for these kind of ensembles. And so I owe it all to my parents. That's what got me interested into music.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I can absolutely relate to that. My mother was my very first violin teacher. It's so interesting to be immersed from such a young age. That's really special to have both of your parents in that world with you. Was music composition then something you always wanted to do from that young age, or is it something you kind of discovered and uncovered over time?
Yeah, it was something that I discovered over time. I would say, like, I really wanted to go into performing, and really that's what I did. Was like I was playing a lot as a kid. I was playing euphonium in the band, playing tuba in the orchestra, playing piano in jazz band, and I was always just performing a lot of music. And I had that interest in composition, but had no idea that years later that would turn into me actually loving to compose music and loving to work with musicians in that way and to have a career doing that. So had no idea life would turn out the way that it has, but very grateful that I get to merge these two worlds that I love, one that's performance and one that's composition.
Going from where you were kind of playing in a jazz band and engaging with these groups, if there was someone interested today that wanted to get into composition, how would you suggest going about that?
Sure thing. I would tell them to begin with the people that they work with every day. And I mean, for me, when I was in school, that was my friends, and that was my director. And so when I was younger, like I would be writing pieces for my friends or writing pieces for our group and seeing if my director would read it and get that experience of collaboration when I was very young. And for me, that was very helpful in not just learning how to compose, but also how to collaborate with other musicians and receive feedback and all of that. So that's what I would say is like begin with the people around you, begin with your friends, and then as time goes on, that gave me the confidence to write for people that I did not know, but what helped me at first was writing for people who I knew and who I played next to every day.
I feel like that's such a big moment of trust to like ask your friends candidly for their feedback on your work and to show it to them. It's so raw, and that can be so powerful to get the people you care about most to give you feedback about what you're doing. It's hard, but that's a very, very important step.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been listening to a lot of music in the lead up to launch, and it's amazing how many genres it spans and, the different emotions that I hopefully want to process and capture and experience in this moment. And some of that has been a lot of your music with kind of these incredible space themes that you've been writing about and that have really stood out for me in the process. So I'm curious, when for you did space kind of first grab your imagination? You obviously are now as an adult composing things that are in theme with space, but were you interested in space when you were a kid also?
Oh, very much, very much. That curiosity of space, I always had that since I was a kid, and that only got stronger as I got older. But yeah, like I was always into, like sci-fi TV shows, sci-fi movies, so much to the point where like I actually wanted to be an aerospace engineer at first before I got into music. I had no clue, what all that would entail. But yeah, like I always like was curious about the unknown and curious about what was out there, and so that's been reflected through my music in lots of ways over the last few years, where writing pieces like Rocket Ship or Lightspeed or even the new opera that I'm working on that is getting more into futurism, that has only gotten stronger. I do have a love for that and for just venturing out and seeing what's out there.
That's so cool. I think it's such a wide variety of themes that you can pull in and write about. What do you think is musically interesting about composing with space travel or space adventure and light in mind?
I don't know. For me, it really opens up the imagination to endless possibilities of like what that could look like and what that could sound like. And so I think that's what's been cool, is that you get the chance to really explore and kind of open your mind to like, well, what these instruments could be like, what this music could sound like. And I'm also a fan of a lot of like sci-fi movie soundtracks and things like that, and I've listened to how other composers have approached this. And sometimes it can be music that's like very energetic, very driving, like, okay, we are going and we are traveling. And others I have found to be very introspective and very sort of retrospective, looking out into, what we don't know and what's out there, and kind of the observation of space in that way. So I think it's just really interesting how different composers can take this huge concept and really, create art that looks and sounds very different from each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe do you have any favorite space-inspired music from other composers that comes to mind?
Yes, of course. Yeah, like I'm thinking of like the music of John Williams, like obviously Star Wars and all of that, to 2001 The Space Odyssey, the soundtrack from that stuff, or even newer movies like Interstellar or Ad Astra, and so many captivating stories now that are kind of happening, and even more like futuristic movies like The Creator or even like Hidden Figures, kind of talking about like how do we get there, right? What are the problems we need to do? What are the things we need to solve to get us to that point? And so there's lots of inspiration. And so like with the pieces that I've written about this concept, I mean, there's just so much in my head, right, that I could pull from. And so, yeah, it's really exciting. That's what I love about it, is like, you don't know where the inspiration will come from, but there's lots of content to be able to pull from.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned Rocket Ship and Lightspeed. When you were writing those, what feelings or ideas were surfacing for you as you were exploring writing them?
Yeah, I think for me, it's just in both cases, I think it was just the excitement of that. And for Lightspeed, I wanted to write a piece that felt like it was constantly moving and moving and moving, and kind of like going really fast. And so keeping that motion happening with the strings and with the winds and the percussion, kind of keeping it moving, that was really what was in my head. And then for Rocket Ship, it was just, launching from the ground and then flying up and taking off. And so musically, what that could evoke as well. So yeah, like both pieces though are about the energy and about the excitement of these events that happen.
I think for me personally, I absolutely can feel that energy in both of those songs. So I think you did a great job capturing that.
Thank you.
So for these two pieces, you had, these moments that you were writing to. Do you ever have or imagine maybe storylines or specific events that you tie to musical action in certain pieces?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think for those two pieces in particular, I sort of leave the narrative kind of up to the listener and kind of let them create their own narrative around it. I've had lots of people ask me about Rocket Ship in particular, and they're like, well, is there a programmatic like narrative or what happens? And I'm just like, no, it's a piece that you kind of get to imagine what that looks like based on your own imagination. And so I think that's what's cool about these pieces, is that no, I didn't really have any specific narrative other than for Rocket Ship, I mean, taking off or right from the ground and lifting up and pushing off into outer space. And then with Lightspeed, it being about really quick travel, really quick motion, really quick energy. So beyond that, no, I don't really have anything as far as a narrative, but I want, the listener to come up with their own narrative of what that would look like and what that would sound like.
Yeah, definitely. I'll be very curious to see as I eventually do launch On a Rocket if it feels like your music and how that comparison goes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that's actually all the questions I have today. Thank you so much for spending some time with me to talk about these pieces of music and your path and your career. And I will absolutely be bringing some of your music with me to space to play on our mission, which is so exciting.
Thank you so much. And it's an absolute pleasure. And can't wait to see how all this unfolds. So best of luck to you.
Thank you so much.